is the Enter Sadmen podcast. Every rock and metal album you should own. Reviewed, rated, and ranked.
Well, welcome to another edition of Enter Sadmen, a special edition. If you've been looking through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever it is you get us from, and you're wondering, where did the episode number go? Why is there no episode number on this? Well, the reason there's no episode number on this is our first listener choice show. So we will be reviewing 3 albums by a listener to the podcast, and they got in touch via Facebook. And you can do the same if you've got albums that you want us to review and put into the Hall of Fame, which is exactly what Tony did. And we'll get to Tony in a minute. But first of all, welcome into the chairs around me, Steve and Richard. Hello, boys. You enjoyed Tony's choices, have we?
Yep. Yeah, very good. Yeah, good selection. And obviously we'll talk about it in a bit. One that I didn't know at all.
Steve?
That's a fascinating selection. Yeah, no, absolutely fascinating. And it's the sort of selection that if we weren't at the other end of the world from this man, we'd sit down and have a right good chinwag over a beer or two, wouldn't we? Because there's much to be talked about. And it seems almost kind of wrong doing it from a distance. But, you know, Tony will understand, I'm sure, as we get into reviewing this stuff, because it's hats off to him. It's brilliant. It's lovely to get someone involved with what we're doing, and it's been a pleasure, you know, listening to these 3 albums.
Yeah, absolutely right. And well, if you're new to the podcast, then just a bit of housekeeping. The idea is we review 3 albums. Each episode must be, well, we say 1970 to 1995, but actually we go a year or 2 either side to pick up the sort of the important stragglers, the Led Zeppelins of this world and the Deep Purples, and Metallica's Load, which is where the other end of the bookend lives. So yeah, if you're new, that's what we do. We rank every track individually. So we listen to these 3 albums forensically over the course of a week, maybe 2, depending on, you know, whether we're around to record each week. So sometimes we live with these albums for a couple of weeks. Listen to them forensically. We discuss them sort of track by track, side by side maybe, but the tracks themselves get an individual score. We add those up, divide them by the number of people that are involved, which is 3, and that gives us an overall album score, and that's what each album takes into the Hall of Fame. And at the top of the Hall of Fame at the moment is Back in Black by AC/DC, arguably an Australian band, which is where Tony comes from. Tony Squire. Well, hello to you. I'm sure you're listening. Tony lives in Brisbane, Queensland. Got in touch, as I say, via Facebook and asked us to review 3 albums. But a little bit about him and his tastes. He says that I asked him what his Desert Island Disc was, and he can't have listened to episode 9 of the podcast because he came back and said Tool with Fear Inoculum. But he says that's because it's got everything on it from mellow to groove to crushing riffs. His Desert Island track, Steve, Panama, Van Halen.
Yeah, I was hoping for Silent Night. But I'll take Panama. That's fine. That's fine. I don't think any worse of a man for that. Trust me.
He says that if he had to listen to only one band, it would be Led Zeppelin. So that's a big box checked there because they're the greatest band of all time. Well, we shall see about that, Tony Squire in Brisbane, Australia. We shall see about that because at the end of this, assuming that we aren't all incontinent and living in care homes, we will be adding up all the scores of all the albums and working out exactly which band has come up with the best of the lot. But I don't think you're going to be far off with Zeppelin, probably. I also asked him, the question that we answered for the podcast and indeed answered on an episode 14, I think. I asked him whether it was Metallica, Maiden or Motley. Do you know what he said? He said Judas Priest. Can't trust these bloody Fucking hell, Tony.
Fucking typical, isn't it? All you had to do.
One job. But he did then come back and say, well, he'd have to say Metallica because he loves everything. And crucially, this is the important bit, he loves everything except St. Anger and Death Magnetic. So that's okay as well. And he also says that said, when you lot are reviewing Master of Puppets, that's some top 10 shit right there. I would do the accent, but I'll just insult him. And well, we have reviewed Master of Puppets, Tony, and it's coming up reasonably soon. So you'll find out exactly where that album goes when we get there. And this, I mean, on a slightly serious note, he added a bit at the end of the kind of conversation I had with him on Facebook and said, because I asked him what his favourite live gig was, and he said it won't be from the Magic era, which obviously is the 1970 to 1995 window that we deal with, because Australia didn't get many of those acts live. And if you don't live in a capital city, you're screwed for live music. Well, I kind of understand that because, it's fucking continents between cities in Australia. But he chose the American band Clutch live at the Zoo in Fortitude Valley, Brisbane in 2010. I have to say, I've never heard any Clutch. Steve, they sound like a band you might be familiar with.
Something about that, isn't there? Yeah, he should try living in the New Forest. We don't get any fucking decent bands down here either. But Clutch, yeah, no, that's something. I'm game for something new, so give that a listen.
In all transparency and all honesty, the three albums that he came up with were Zodiac Mindwarp and The Love Reaction with Tattooed Beat Messiah. He also came up with a band. This is the band that we've never heard, none of us had heard before until the last week, which is The Angels, Beyond Salvation. And he also came up with Bang Tango's Psycho Cafe. But we'd already done that. In fact, Tony, that'll be the next episode out of the box. So hopefully you'll be able to hear what we think of that one in the next week or two. So I asked him to choose another, and he chose The Cult and Sonic Temple, which I think is going to be fascinating because I've always thought that was my favourite Cult album, and I know you two are very firmly in the love camp, aren't you? But we're going to find out. We're going to find out where that sits in comparison to Sonic Temple. So, as we do when somebody else chooses the albums for us, each of us sponsors one of them. So I've sponsored Zodiac Mindwarp. Steve, you have sponsored
The Cult, Sonic Temple. Pleased with that. Very pleased. Very pleased.
Which leaves you, Richard, with?
Yeah, with Beyond Salvation, Angels, and a fascinating band. Amazing history. So we'll come to that in a little while.
Okay, well, if you've not heard Zodiac Mindwarp and The Love Reaction, or The Angels, or The Cult's Sonic Temple, here's a little taster of what we've been listening to over the last week to 10 days.
Let's break the law.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that little snippet, and we will do this episode as we do every other in reviewing the albums in chronological order. And that means Mark will be first to kick off with Zodiac Mindwarp, The Love Reaction, and Tattooed Beat Messiah. Mark.
Opening album sleeve notes.
So, cards on the table. I bought this album when it came out. I either bought it or I was given it, can't remember which. And I listened to Prime Mover because that was the single, and I probably listened to the whole album through another once. And then I thought, well, I don't need to hear that again. So I put it away until about 10 days ago. And I kind of put Zodiac Mindwarp into the sort of almost the Rob Zombie kind of Wild Hearts sort of almost novelty band, Mama's Boys or the Mac Lads, Beer and Sex and Chips and Gravy and that sort of stuff. It felt a bit, Spinal Tap. It just felt to me back in the day a bit like a novelty record. So I just lost interest in it. I don't even know why I lost interest in it. I think I probably felt it sounded all the same. But the joy of this podcast, of course, is that you have to listen to these albums, or we have to listen to these albums quite intensively. So I've had several spins, a good many spins of Tattoo Beat Messiah. And has my attitude or opinion of it changed? Yes, I think it has. I think it has changed. I think I still struggle to fall in love with it, I suppose. But actually, I can see it for what it is, which is actually a bit of good fun. I was talking to you, Richard, wasn't I, the other day, and I think you've got a challenge to lay down for me and Steve about how we view this in comparison to some other bands that we might have spoken about on the podcast. And I'm sure we'll get to that. But let's do a bit of nuts and bolts on this particular album. Zodiac Mindwarp and The Love Reaction were formed in London. And this album is one of 6 that they've released, but really it's just one of 3 because they didn't really do anything after this. This is their debut. It came out after an EP, and I'm not sure what happened to them, but that's it. The story kind of ends here, guys. We at some point we may get to the next one, Hoodlum Thunder, which came out 3 years later, but it came out with no fanfare and it did nothing. So this is the one shot deal that Zodiac Mindwarp and The Love Reaction had in terms of their commercial success. They recorded it in late 1987. I've absolutely no idea which studio it was in, but it was released on February the 16th, 1988 on Vertigo. It runs to around 41:15, produced by Bill Drummond and David Balfour, or Balf. I have no idea how it's pronounced. So if David, if you are listening and I've mispronounced it, I do apologise, sir. But Bill Drummond was a member of the KLF, who recorded Justified and Ancient and Last Train to Moo and some other really good stuff, actually. I like the KLF. And David Balfe was the keyboard player in The Teardrop Explodes. So no great links, either at that point or, in fact, afterwards, with working with a rock band. And I've not really been able to find out how those two got involved in it, but I can only assume that at the time, Zodiac Mindwarp, whose real name, just so you know, is Mark Manning, was a graphic designer working within the music press, I think. And I can only assume that their paths had crossed. Maybe they knew each other. I don't know. So these two guys come in and they produce it, and I think they've done a reasonably good job. Professor Napthine will tell us what he thinks of the production. I couldn't hear an awful lot wrong with it. The novelty record sensibility about it really, I think, comes from the fact that all of this band have alter egos, which kind of I can't find quite puerile, but I'm probably just not getting into the spirit of it. So the lineup is Zodiac Mindwarp, aka Mark Manning, on vocals, Cobalt Stargazer, who has the less rock and roll name of Jeff Bird, on guitars, but and then also on guitars, but whose real name I don't know, is Flash Bastard. And then we've got on bass Trash D Garbage, and then Stephen Landrum on drums, also known as Slam Thunderhide. It's 11 tracks long, 6 on side 1, 5 on side 2. Well, it's actually more than that, because they're all sort of little kind of interstitials and spoken word bits and pieces that are terribly, terribly short. So I've just kind of wrapped it all up into 11 tracks. Track 1 is Wolfchild's Speech, followed by the single Prime Mover, then Skull Spark Joker, Backseat Education, then Hey Baby and Bad Girl City being the actual song, Untamed Stare, Tattoo Beat Messiah, Turn It Over, you get Spoken Intro Upside Down, then Let's Break the Law, Spasm Gang, Holy Gasoline, Planet Girl, Kid Stuff, and then that goes out with Messianic Reprise. It's fine. I think it's a good album. Will I play it end to end again? Probably not, if I'm being absolutely honest. But that isn't because it isn't good fun, because it is. And I box it in the same kind of way that I do Spinal Tap. If I want to have a laugh and want something to put a smile on my face, I would play some of this, because the lyrics are just brilliant, completely ridiculous, utterly inappropriate in today's age. But that's the case with a lot of this stuff. But they do put a smile on your face. But just like Spinal Tap, I love that. I love both the Spinal Tap albums, but I wouldn't play either of them end to end again. And I feel the same way about this one. So how do you two feel about it?
I think that's what you have to do, isn't it? Before you listen to this album, you read the personnel.
Yeah.
And that puts your mind on the right wavelength. It's Cobalt Stargazer and Flash Bastard. I mean, it's just brilliant. I didn't call it novelty. I called it character. There is this character, particularly in Zodiac Mindwarp. So I was thinking of obviously one of Steve's favourite albums that we reviewed on the pod, in Warfare, and even a little bit of Meatloaf. So there is it's definitely, and we'll come on to it. You can tell that there's influences from people like Alice Cooper on this as well. This is like Alice Cooper. This is Alice Cooper meets Rob Zombie kind of character, isn't it? Because one of the problems with a character-driven album is it leaves you nowhere to go, because everything still is absolutely centered around that character. That said, I think the production's fantastic. I think some of the guitar work is brilliant. And in terms of style, this is a sleaze album. This is sleaze rock. Brought into the late 80s, 90s. So there's elements of Sunset Strip sleaze on this, as well as a bit Gothy. There's obviously elements of cult. There's certainly Alice Cooper, as you say. This would have then draw a line from this, and you get into stuff like White Zombie. But there was there's some good tracks on this, some really good tracks on it, and I think a lot of it comes down to love, hate, or indifferent about Zodiac himself.
No, I'd agree with pretty much all of that. I think, Steve, where did you get to?
I Listen, I was in a good mood anyway, just thinking about this album. I'm in a better mood now. I've just seen a learner driver go into a lamppost. so I'm now really happy. Mark, I've known you the best part of 40 years. I never knew you liked the KLF. I see you in a very different light, my friend, right now.
And what colour of light is that, Steve?
It's a light where I wish he'd disappeared. Black, gone, go away. I no longer know you. We'll save that conversation for another day. I bought Zodi back in the day as well because you did because you did. You know, it was out there, and some of the singles that had come before the album, and they were kind of well known before it happened, as it were, kind of, weren't they? And you just thought you wanted to be part of that. So I remember buying it. Yeah, I could pretty much echo everything you've said. I bought it, played it once, didn't play it again, picked it up last week for the first time. Absolutely, where I was with that, it was that kind of novelty record, which is, you know. And that's my problem with this is kind of marking it, because creatively it's difficult to mark very seriously, but that's not what the album was about. You know, Spinal Tap. I think Spinal Tap's funnier than this personally, but you know, this is just silly rock silliness, isn't it? And there's always been a time and a place for that.
We've all played. I think we've probably all played this album front to back, one track after another, all in one go. So 11 tracks. So today what I did was I just dipped in and out of it, and I played other stuff in between. And actually, when you just play one track, it's a completely different experience. And you can really, I actually quite enjoyed playing it that way, because it was a bit fresher. Because I think you're absolutely right, Steve, that you play this end to end, and it's one track after another, and eventually, like all jokes, it wears thin. And you just go, okay, well, I've had enough now. I'll go on and do something else.
That experience is not unique to Zodiac Mindwarp, because we come across that with an awful lot of albums, and serious, earnest albums as well, where you think track by track, actually, they're fine. I don't actually want to listen to it end to end. So that's not particularly an accusation aimed at Zodiac Mindwarp, is it?
No.
Many more serious bands with them were making that same mistake of being a bit too samey. Dip in and out. And yeah, it's a different sounding thing, definitely.
Well, they've also made the mistake, haven't they? And again, this isn't down to this band at all, but they've also made the mistake of probably having an album that's 3 tracks too long, because it does drop off at the back end. Yeah. So, but let's give it a spin and see how it stacks up, sort of one track at a time. I think I'm just going to get past the sort of the nonsense of the spoken word stuff, because that takes up it's not long, but it takes up more time than it should. So we start off with the single Prime Mover, which got to number 18 in the UK charts. Not sure what it did anywhere else in the world, but this was the track that put Zodiac Mindwarp and the Love Reaction on the map, and all over Top of the Pops, all over TV, probably all over MTV as well. And what's not to like? It's bouncy. It's got a massively catchy chorus, and an absolutely incendiary guitar solo. I mean, this is one track that I probably could play over and over again, and I would tire of it eventually, but I've not tired of it this week. I'd still kind of feel the same way about this track now as I did back then. It's great.
I'm less bothered about it, I must admit. It's their biggest single, wasn't it? Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, it's catchy. It's all about the video. You've seen the video, presumably. I mean, it's just about the band having a fucking laugh and a right old hoot. To me, the song's not that memorable. I think there's better songs on it. There's 2 or 3 better songs on it. I love the lyrics. I mean, you're going to talk some lyrics, aren't you? But I went over to songmeanings.com to see if anyone had worthily discussed, well, I'm Christ in shades, I'm a napalm god, your lipstick flickers round my lightning rod. And funnily enough, there were no comments. No one had no one had found any hidden meaning in that. And who knew? Listen, it's a right good romp to kick off the album, but there's better tracks on here.
Yeah, I mean, this was big in the UK, wasn't it? I mean, it was all over the radio, just everywhere, absolutely everywhere. You couldn't escape it. It felt very fresh, very different, tons of attitude, didn't it? It never grabbed me back then, personally. It's good, like it's good, but for me, it's still not the best track on the album. There are better ones here, but you can hear. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about the riffs. I mean, there are some killer riffs in this, and you know which song it is just from that. Those just the opening few chords, don't you?
And they go all punky with the second song, which is Skull Spark Joker. I think it's got a good build. I like the gang vocals, and it's that detuned guitar, isn't it? A detuned guitar is so distinctive. Yeah, I think that's a solid track too.
Yeah, I like this more than Prime Mover.
Yeah, me too. Skull Spark Joker, love it to bits. It's all very mean and sleazy. I love that riff. Obviously, that's kind of almost going to be a given, isn't it, as this album goes on? And there's a bridge in there straight off. Don't Change That Song by Faster Pussycat, and that fucking ticks every box for me. So yeah, winner.
So we go from a winner to track 3, which is brilliantly ridiculous. Backseat Education. Look, I mean, I realise that actually for a lot of people listening, kind of understanding what these tracks are all about is going to be quite hard. So Backseat Education is about shagging in the back of a car. Just in case you were thinking actually it's about somebody being home taught. It's not. But it really is just Prime Mover in a wig and a moustache, I think, because you can sing Prime Mover to it. And I think the lyrics are way more interesting than the song. But yeah, again, it's good fun. It's good fun.
And the video is similar as well. It seems to involve girls and the band playing. Yeah. So, yeah. Not exactly originality involved at any stage of this, but it was just a band having a laugh on it. All seems a bit dated now, but, you know, it does power along, definitely. But it's not a patch on Skull Spark Joker.
Yeah, but this has got, again, this for me, it's got a real load of LA sleaze about it, hasn't it? And those kind of chorus hooks, questionable subject matter, obviously, real pace and energy to it. Yeah, I'm happy. I think these two beat the Prime Mover for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd go that far about this with Prime Mover. I mean, there's a whole load of Alice Cooper in this. In this particular track, I think, I just think it's too on the nose, really. But I have to admit, by the way, I confess to this. Up until this week, I always thought this was an American band because it sounded so LA sleaze. Of course, they're not. They're British. We get to Bad Girl City, and this kind. You know how there are some albums where it just sags a bit in the middle.
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
This is the sag.
Big time.
The sag. Yeah.
It's just. I mean, it's quite straight ahead, isn't it? But very. Yeah. No, it is. It's almost grating now. But again, it would have sounded different, wouldn't it? Presumably back in the day. If you're a teenager listening to this, you probably think it's amazing. But if you were buying into that kind of rock nonsense that they were trying to peddle, Christ, I still sing along to "Animal Fuck Like a Beast," so I'm not going to. I'm not going to pretend that.
Yeah,
I'm not childish.
Yeah, well, you've set the bar with Faster Pussycat. You know, with only one way to go from there, isn't there? I mean, we talk about repeats. I found that Bad Girl City so similar to Backseat Education, but inferior. And I think again, it is. It's this. If you're kind of hearing the same song again, it will tire on you eventually.
Yeah. Oh, that's got a fucking wicked riff running through it as well, though. It's I don't know, it just lacks a bit, I think, in the performance, in the delivery, the vocal performance. I mean, I personally, I think Mark Manning and Zodiac Mindwarp is as cool as fuck. I mean, you know, and I think the other thing you need to remember when you listen to this stuff is that we were at a point where the music was changing anyway, weren't we? You know, 88, 89, hair metal was on the way out, and bands had to do something new to get noticed because, you know, metal was dying on its arse, and ultimately that's what obviously opened the door for the G word. And while this is nothing like grunge, this is different. This is very different to other stuff that had kind of gone before it and was still around at the time. And it would have sounded, you're right, Steve, it would have sounded fresh and different and new and exciting, actually, back in the day. And, I think back, what was I in 88, 89 when this came out? I was sort of 23, 24. So maybe even I at that point was a bit too old for it. I don't know. Because this is a kind of, this is, young, dumb, and full of cum, isn't it? Really, let's be honest. And
it was a visual art form as well, wasn't it?
It was.
That they were there to be looked at as well. So they chucked out loads of videos and made themselves noticed at a time when, as you say, when metal was flagging, and this was a band who were prepared to expose every cliche about the art form that we love, milk it to its nth degree, and see where it took them.
There's a huge amount of irony in it, isn't there?
Oh, God, yeah.
Sarcasm.
Yeah.
They're taking the piss.
Yeah,
So it's not an album. This is not an album of serious artists who want to be taken seriously. Yeah. This is a good, fun record by an anti-establishment band that were in it to tear stuff up and rebuild. So
I personally, I take Flash Bastard and Cobalt Stargazer very seriously.
What do you said? What? But you're not taking the other three seriously.
Untamed Stare. It's. They got such hooky guitar work, haven't they? And they play really well together. It's fantastic stuff. Well, with this one, I talked earlier about the character, and he really does go overboard on the character on Untamed Stare, and that started to turn me off a bit, I think, on this one. It becomes a bit of a racket by the end.
Untamed Stare, it's metal at pace, Steve.
Yeah, no, I like the way this side ends, actually, because I think Untamed Stare is a pickup from Bad Girl City, and I think the title track, which finishes it off, is track of the album anyway. So
so do I. Yeah.
So there's a pickup with Untamed Stare, bags of energy, loads of pace, and then into this brilliant side one closer, which contains elements that other tracks haven't, like a melody and a breakdown and a quite decent solo in it. It's almost it was almost a reminder that what they could do musically, because I thought it was as close to the Almighty say as they came, and there's a kind of which is probably the biggest compliment I can pay that track, so that it shows their musicianship. God, that sounds so sort of Poncy when that's almost the last thing they were going for. But I really, really like the title track. I think it's brilliant.
But do you not feel the way I feel about this? Which is, I got to this track and I love this track. I think it's the track of the album. But I sat there thinking, God, do you know what? I just wish more of the album was like this.
Yeah,
because it would have been fantastic. It would have been.
It comes as a surprise, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And I feel sort of slightly, although I understand what they're doing for the rest of the album, I feel slightly disappointed. I mean, I think they do come close to it with another track, but you just think, God, you really did have it. And if you'd gone down this road, I wonder where that might have led.
Yeah, but then again, I think, if Spinal Tap had produced, track 3, side 2 had been something like Stairway to Heaven or the equivalent thereof, you'd think, well, what the fuck is that doing there? So this album was never going to be about being taken that seriously, was it? But it just so happens that this is a very good song.
So why put it on the album then?
Yeah, I know.
It's that kind of either leave it off and be a fun band, or put on something really musically accomplished, which I think this is. And what are you saying? You're saying, oh, by the way, we can do this too. I don't know.
No, I can't answer that, but glad they put it on.
I mean, let's break the law. Track 1, side 2. I think it's a very, very well written and arranged song. It's more mid-paced. I love how it starts. I think the verses are really well arranged and atmospheric. You've got this bass line, ride cymbal, dual guitar. But then it's almost a hit for me on Let's Break the Law. The Zodiac character spoils the song because actually underneath it, I think it's fantastic.
It's a great song. It's a good old chug, isn't it? It's super nasty, super mean. But I'm with you, Richard. But I mean, Mindwarp, if I can call him that. He jars a bit, doesn't he, as the song goes on? But then, of course, without his delivery, it wouldn't be them, would it? I guess.
No, and he is very definitely channeling Alice here, isn't he?
Yeah.
I do think Tattoo Beat Messiah is the track of the album, but I think it's driven very close by Spasm Gang. Personally, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, no, proper old school punk number for me. I mean, I with that kind of nonsensical Zodiac twist, but I really like it. Like it again. I think it's a great song.
This had the biggest echoes of like Warfare for me, but with someone who can actually hit notes.
What are you saying? I think this is the last of the good songs on the album. I think the rest of it is either average or worse. Starting with Driving on Holy Gasoline. If I'm being absolutely honest, I have to play the songs at the end of this album to remember what they are. And ultimately, that speaks volumes, doesn't it? If this had been an 8-track album, I think I'd have been much happier with it than I am. And that's not to say I haven't enjoyed listening to it. I have, but I think I would have felt less wearied at the end of it.
It's a foot tapper, isn't it? It's probably not their intention. It's probably almost like an insult, but it is very catchy.
A good foot tapper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Steve. I'm not sure that's the critique that Mark Manning was going for when he wrote the album.
Quite. Yeah.
It's a good foot tapper,
and his vocals let it down as well. But that's almost beyond the point now.
For me, Driving on Gasoline, I think the riff is fine. I'm slightly bored by the vocal now. Planet Girl, I can take or leave, and Kid Stuff. I don't think they hit the mark on the sort of the epic track, epic album closer. But it just feels like everything. It's like they've got down to the sludge, and rather than just going, actually, let's just not put it on. They've gone right. Well, it's not all that great, but we'll just put those at the end of the record.
It is a massive wah, wah, wah. I kind of get why they did Kids Stuff, because it's almost a joke, isn't it? The big heartfelt finale. It's so tongue-in-cheek. I find it hard to give it the low score it stylistically merits because that almost misses the point. But it's not a good song, particularly. I'm with you on Party Girl. I think that's fairly shite as well. It is a limp finish. To an album that, at points was quite exciting. It still makes me laugh. I still think Kid Stuff's quite amusing, just because of the sort of cheek of it, really. But it's not a great song, is it?
Okay, well, look, let's find out which tracks were front and centre at the top of the pile and which one was, bottom and centre at the bottom of the pile. Steve, start with you.
I don't fucking know, do I? Oh, God. I like the title track. Tattoo Beat Messiah would be my track of the album. And the weak link, for me, I'll give it to Bad Girl City. Okay. Score-wise, Bad Girl City, yeah.
Rich?
Okay. For me, my low would be Kid Stuff. And a high, I think I'm going to give to Skull Spark Joker.
Okay, well, I'm kind of split between the two of you because my highlight on the album is the title track, Tattoo Beat Messiah, but I'm with you, Richard, on the low, which I've also got as Kid Stuff. Tony, thank you for album one of the three, because that's been a really interesting listen. Really enjoyed the week with it. And I have a much better impression and aftertaste from the album today in 2022 than I did back in 1988. So that's a good thing. But we move on to album number 2. One of my favourite albums by this band, if not the favourite album by this band. I don't know, because I haven't gone back and checked the scores that I gave to the predecessor on the pod. But we're going to discuss The Cult and Sonic Temple. Steve.
Opening album sleeve notes.
Right, The Cult and Sonic Temple. Okay, let's start with the non-contentious stuff, shall we? I.e. the factual stuff. Sonic Temple, their 4th album, released on April 11th, 1989, recorded the fall of the year before, September to November 88, released on the Beggar's Banquet label. It runs to 52 minutes, and it was produced by Bob Rock. 4th album, 4th different producer. First one with Bob Rock at Little Mountain Sound in Vancouver, very well known studio in the far side of Canada. Previous album was Electric in 1987. The next album was Ceremony in 1991. The personnel, classic lineup, really. Well, no, not quite. No, Ian Astbury on lead vocals, Billy Duffy on lead guitar, and Jamie Stewart on bass. And they had Mickey Curry arrive to take care of drums. It's reached number 3 in the UK. It reached number 13 down under. And there are 10 tracks on it. All written by Duffy and Astbury. 5 on side 1, Sun King, Firewoman, American Horse, Edie, Chow Baby, Sweet Soul Sister. And then on side 2, Soul Asylum, New York City, Automatic Blues, Soldier Blue, and Wake Up, Time for Freedom. Now then, I saw this on Wikipedia, and I'm guessing they're not wrong. Guitar World magazine, or website, whichever one it is, in 2015, rated Sonic Temple in the top 20 of hair metal albums of the 80s. That's right, folks, you heard that right. Hair metal. Am I not the only one thinking, when the fuck were The Cult a hair metal band? So we're talking sea changes, people here. Now, I like The Cult a lot, but then we've had this conversation before, having reviewed Love, which was the album that Mark referred to earlier, their second album in a previous episode of the pod. And we questioned Love's metalness, legitimately, I think, before we did it. But we did question it. Well, Mark questioned it. We told him to fuck off, and we did it anyway. But there is absolutely no questioning the metalness of Sonic Temple. This is a bona fide heavy metal album. Which just leaves me asking the question, is it a Cult album? It's almost a conversation that is kind of an aside, because we're not here to worry about the sort of the rights and wrongs, the ethics and the reasons why they went down this road. We're here to review it as an album, and it's a very good metal album. But there's part of me that thinks, I love them for their indiness and their gothicness and their Native Americanness and that very kind of distinct, identifiable sound that the Cult manufactured on their first 2 albums, culminating in Love. That was special, and it stood them apart. here we are, just a couple of years down the line, and they don't want to stand apart. They want to be one of the best hair metal bands of the 80s. and so I'm thinking, so seismic steps, so comparisons, I immediately thought of, and there's an interesting coincidence, I immediately thought of High and Dry and Hysteria by Def Leppard, albums 2 and 4, poles apart. And here we go, the Cult albums 2 and 4, Love and Sonic Temple. And again, this remarkable, I found a great word, transmutation of a band. That's a fucking word. I mean, that's what we've got here, this transmutation of a band. But it was a choice. The Cult wanted to do this. They weren't railroaded down this avenue. I've read many interviews with Billy Duffy doing some work for this, and one of the ones that from many of the quotes he's given, he wanted to capture the essence of what a power chord sounded like. They wanted to become a metal band. For fuck's sake, just look at the album cover. I mean, it couldn't be more metal. The bloke's just standing. I think it's Duffy, isn't it? The guitarist on the
yeah.
He's just standing there like a rock god on an album cover. That just wouldn't have happened, a few years earlier. But yeah, basically, that. I mean, as I say, that's purely for kind of conversational purposes. It's an interesting conversation, but the album itself, great. I still love Asper's voice, but it's still tinged, with a kind of disappointment that much of what made the Cult so memorable, so sort of defiantly distinctive, that sort of indie sound that they brought into the hard rock domain with Love, it's vanished. It's pretty much gone. But I'll mark this on its merits as a standalone album, and I shall mark it high because there's some great songs on it. But it's playing with my head. It's just playing with my head. Has it played with your head?
I can see the line of sight. We when we reviewed Love, even though there was to what extent does Love fit in our hard rock heavy metal family? We reviewed how their fans hated them for it because even with Love, they'd taken this step towards a deliberate step towards a much more rockier sound because it appealed to them. Then. So if you look at where they came from before Love to Love, and then Love to Electric, and then Electric to this, there is a line of sight.
Yeah.
So it was clear where they wanted to be, and I mean they absolutely wanted to smash America with this, didn't they? I mean that was their purpose, and which they achieved. I'm fascinated to see in terms of our scores track by track, because I haven't added up and averaged mine yet versus Love, and we're still to do Electric. So so this is going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm so fucking shallow. I really am. Because I just went, yes, that's what I want. And here I am feeling like I've sold myself out after that, Steve, because oh my God, it's I love the Cult, and this is brilliant, but it's not really the Cult. And I'm like, no, it's great. It's great. This will have come as a surprise to absolutely nobody after Electric.
Yeah.
Because as Richard says, line of sight, you can map the Cult all the way from the debut right the way through to Ceremony and beyond, and it is just stepping stones, and they're all in a line. You know how we talked about Led Zeppelin 3 and how I think it was I felt 3 was sort of slightly on a line of stepping stones. 3 was slightly out to one side. You couldn't have Zeppelin 4 without it, but equally it was very different to Zeppelin 2 and very different to Zeppelin 4. This is absolutely mapped out, and I love this album. I think 80% of this album is absolutely fantastic. I think there's a bit of dross at the back end. I love Electric as well. I loved Electric when it came out. I still love the old Cult. The not heavy metal Cult. I think they're fantastic, and I think on Love you've got two of the greatest of the two best songs that the Cult ever wrote, in Big Neon Glitter and Rain. But I just think this is absolutely fantastic as a piece of hard rock heavy metal. Thank you very much, lads, because this is one of my favorite. I mean, not just my favorite. Well, I don't know. We'll find out whether it's my favorite cult album or not. But if it is, it's not just one of my favorite cult albums. It is also one of my favorite albums. So, Tony, great choice, mate. I'm very, very happy to have spent the last week in the company of this.
Yeah, no, I absolutely go along with that. Yeah, definitely. But I can tell you now, hand on heart, and I've not even done the maths. It's not my favourite cult album. I always thought Ceremony wasn't quite on the same trajectory. But I think they were so fucked up at that point, weren't they? They were just
it's got Wild Hearted Sun on it, hasn't it? Which is about as heavy metal as you can get as well. So there's quite a lot of harder stuff on it.
Stuff going on.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's a good old fashioned 10-tracker, 5 per side, which is nice, cute, easy. Kicks off with Sun King. I like it. I like the structure. I like that kind of light touch start. Twin paced main riffs. Chorus is safe enough, if I'm honest. That's it really for me. I find it quite a safe track, if I'm honest. Nothing exceptional here. Much better tracks to come. The first Gothy solo that smacks of a more upfront metal approach, which is fine. It's not a knee in the nuts by any stretch for me, but I quite like it.
It's only track 1 because of the opening, I think, because there are better side 1 openers on this album. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's because it builds, isn't it? It starts off with sort of fairly this sort of pining guitar line going through it, and then the tribal drums come in. Don't know what you're worrying about with your Native American stuff. There's plenty of that on this album, and Sun King is one of them. I think Sun King's got a lot of tribal stuff about it. So I like Sun King, but yeah, we've not got to the main event yet, without a shadow of a doubt.
No, I think it's great. I love the atmosphere and the build. I mean, Bob Rock's production spot on from the start, isn't it? And I mean, there was a view, wasn't there? Was it Rick Rubin? I think that produced Electric. And,
it was.
The feeling that they in the desire to get a more stripped back sound, they really did strip it to the bone. I still love Electric, but they've added a sophistication back in on this album, and that comes through straight away with Sun King. I think it's a fantastic opener and one of the tracks of the album for me. And I think that this married with Firewoman track 2, that there is, I don't know about you two, that there is a real heat. I don't know how they've managed to do it. The atmosphere on both of these tracks, you can almost feel the heat of them in the guitar sound and just everything else going on. The pair of them are, I think, a fantastic way to kick off the album.
It's a great metal sound, isn't it? No two ways about it. I mean, I prefer Firewoman to Sun King, I must admit. Yeah, what was that great quote about Rubin? He didn't so much produce them as reduce them. That was what that was.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
With Electric, but Rock was never going to do that, was he? He was going to let them flower and just bring so much more power and sort of energy and everything. I prefer Firewoman to Sun King. Number 1 in New Zealand for our Antipodean friends, Firewoman. And apparently, and Tony would know this better than me, this is the song that plays out Australia's F1 shows on whatever channel F1 is shown down under. There you go. Which would make Firewoman presumably hugely recognisable down there, which would explain why it's their most successful single in Australia, reaching number 24 in the charts. There you go. We don't just do fucking entertainment on this show. We do education as well, babies. I like Firewoman more than Sun King, but it's a good start. Great start.
My frothometer is bubbling. Absolutely bubbling. I love Firewoman. Absolutely love it. It's such a hooky song. I try not to sing too much. It's not fair on other people, but oh my God, this has got a hook like you wouldn't believe. I absolutely adore it. Fantastic. And it's the breaks and it's the double kick on the drums. Oh man, God. Very happy.
Well, you might be happy, but of course we all know that the best song is yet to come because it's American Horse, which is track 3, which is, I just love to bits. I forget all the bollocks about what it's about, because whenever you hear Asprey or Duffy try to explain what their song's about, it's just so beyond ludicrous. You just think, what drugs were you on, lads? I mean, so he talks about it being a sort of black stallion with the Indian bees and the American flag draped over it, all very symbolic. It's a great song, though. Am I alone in thinking this is the pick of the first three? I love that prolonged kind of tortured ending, built around that the best piece of solo work, to my mind. From Gothy on this album.
Don't get me wrong. I love American Horse. I really do. I think it's got huge amounts of atmosphere, and I think it's relentless in the kind of the grit and the rhythm in it. But no, it's not. It's not my track of the album. It wouldn't. I don't think it would be in my top three. Actually.
Oh, really? Yeah.
No.
I like the idea that it's a cross between "We Will Rock You" and "Going Crazy." I think that's
true. That's
a fine talent. That's a fine little cocktail. That is.
Which Steve makes it derivative. Therefore, I don't like it.
Fantastic way to describe it. I think, it's not up there with the two that preceded it for me. Okay. But I think why you like it is there are echoes of love here. Again,
yeah, massively.
That's clear, and the groove is infectious.
It is. Mm-hmm.
So what we've actually concluded, Steve, is that you're just pining for a previous version of the band.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to say I'm not, but because I'm not. Because I love my metal. But fuck off. Yeah, I am. So listen. While I sulk, you talk me through Edie Ciao Baby, which is track 4.
Piece of fucking genius. That's all you need to know. Absolutely love it. I think it's brilliantly constructed. I think it's haunting, beautiful. I think his vocal on it is amazing. I think it shows their kind of softer, their ability, because it builds into something monstrous. But at the front and the back end of it, you get this kind of really gentle treatment of what is actually a beautiful melody. So, one of the tracks on the album, and to be honest, I haven't even finished scoring this album because I'm not sure I should be trusted with the scores because I just completely sold it. So,
just take some responsibility, man. You're going to have to score it, all right?
Yes, I know, but I'm worried that it's going to end up with lots of 10s.
This is what Bob Rock does for you, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, the layers, the accents, the little bits and pieces that just fade in and out. I mean, it's so brilliantly layered. I love the strings. I don't know who did the orchestration. I couldn't find out. I mean, of course, I was wondering whether they got Michael Kamen in again.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. Yeah, it sounds like it, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. It absolutely does. So it needs headphones. This one, it really. If you please get, if you want to really understand this song, get a proper, decent pair of headphones and enjoy it. Although Duffy, I read that he felt that they'd still missed the target a bit on this.
Yeah, no, echo everything you've just said, and we sign off with the final single off the album, final track on side 1, which is "Sweet Soul Sister," which they wrote in Paris, apparently, about the American culturalization of the Europeans. Very sultry. Love that groovy bass line. It's just an all-round good song. A really good end to a really good side of music.
For me, this is the closest to anything off of Love. I'd put this in nearly the same bucket stuff like Revolution. You got that groove. You got a fantastic bass line. And this is where, I mean, Duffy knows how to write a hook, doesn't he? This just gives you a great big cuddle and doesn't let go.
Yeah.
For me, inevitably, this is a slight, tiny step down from Edie, but yeah, we're talking about tenths, hundredths, thousandths of a mark, really. It's a fantastic way to end the album, this side of the album. Sultry, moody, beautiful, fantastic.
Yeah, no, it is good. So that's side 1. Side 2, I don't know whether I'm alone in thinking this. It does tail away, I think.
Yep.
And it starts from an absolute banging high. Soul Asylum. Just one of my favourite cult tracks. there's something, that bass line, there's something of the sort of Joy Division or New Order about that bass line. Nothing in the least bit Joy Division about the guitar solo, which is really frenetic. It's moody, but the song's moody. It just chugs and it thunders. It almost, if there's a negative, it kind of loses its way a little bit about the 5.5 minute mark. 5.5 minutes, for fuck's sake. The song lasts almost 8, by the way. When they try to go a little bit Metallica. Is it too long? Arguably, but I still love it to bits. It's just such a mood.
It's got such scale, hasn't it? That's the thing. And and what they and I think what they do, that guitar solo aside, what the Cult are so good at doing is controlling a song. They have complete control over this throughout the whole thing. So it would be very easy to go at this sort of 3.5 minute mark. Okay, well, let's hit the, put the hammer down, let's go. But they don't. They just keep holding it and holding it and holding it. And the guitar solo is a bit frenetic, but it's also got this sort of very hugely melodic chorus. Fantastic way to open side 2. Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to say brilliant a lot. Brilliant.
Well, the first impression hearing it again at the start, it's I think Rage Against the Machine stole this for Wake Up off of their debut, that dead letter. Again, a lovely subtle orchestration, just nice layers. I do feel by the time it gets to, as you say, 5 minutes, it's starting to drag a little for me. Not a dirge, but just drag a little.
So can I just interject and I'll just throw a little grenade into the party here, which is, I don't know, Richard, whether you would agree with this or whether you've picked this up, but there is something of Stargazer about this track. I
hadn't got that. Let me give that another listen.
It's just that it's the underlying rhythm, the air, and the flow, and the wash. And which surprises me that you like it so much. I mean, obviously it's not Rainbow and it's not Ronnie James Dio singing it, so that's probably better from your point of view anyway, Steve. But given the structure of the song is actually quite similar to Stargazer, I'm surprised you don't like Stargazer more than you do. But anyway, it's a different conversation. Just thought I'd add it in. That's thrown you.
That's one to mull over. Yeah. Well, I would mull over it, but I'm now listening to New York City, which is...
Oh, my God.
Oh, here we go again. It's brilliant. Can I come up? Okay.
No. Fantastic.
Oh, fantastic. That was the word. Yeah. I like it. I love the energy. I love the pace, obviously. More screaming guitars. I mean, what's not to like? A daft conversational bit with, of all people, Iggy Pop, who they apparently rode to the studio from a gig on the back of Asprey's bike. I'd have done it for half the price. It doesn't add anything to it. But I like the song. I love the pace. Love the pace of it. And I do love it. And I love that kind of lyric as well that goes through the sort of pre-chorus.
It's the bridge.
It's to die for, lyrically, isn't it? Yeah.
I find it a bit straightforward, actually. I like the blank sense of the honky-tonk piano, good guitar work, but it's I expect a bit more of them than this.
Yeah, but you're not expecting more from Mark, are you? He loves straightforward.
No. But you're not shallow. That's your problem. You're not shallow, and I am. And it's a great riff, and I love it.
Yeah,
but is that the last time? No, but that's the last time I'm going to say that it's fantastic or brilliant.
Yeah, no, and I'm absolutely with you on that, because I think it drops quite substantially for Automatic Blues, Soldier Blue, and Wake Up Time for Freedom. I mean, there's elements of decency about all three. They suddenly go a bit Aerosmith with Automatic Blues. There's a bit of adamantine drumming about Soldier Blue, which I quite like, harks back to Love, but it's a bit average as a song. Some of the moodiness in Wake Up Time for Freedom. I love the guitar work in Wake Up Time for Freedom. Fucking hate that chorus.
Yeah.
So it tapers rather badly, I think.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I quite like Automatic Blues. It really is the cult to Aerosmith, isn't it? It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But I like how it sort of drops you down, sweeps you up again. But yeah, Soldier Blue. I mean, that kind of sounds like Soldier Blue is a bit of a rehash of Hollow Man with some other bits of love, and it is running out of steam a bit. And then with Wake Up in Time for Freedom, and I'm glad to see George Michael makes an appearance.
Yes, exactly.
It's George Michael meets Guns N' Roses. It's Wake Up in Time for Freedom. Some cowbell on it, not enough for an entry.
Oh, Mark?
Nothing to add, really. I mean, I think I've said it. It's that, as you've said, there are bits of each of the last three songs that I think are very good. But it's as complete songs, they sag a bit around the edges. Yeah, I can take or leave the last three tracks, if I'm being completely honest.
So my money's on Love in a match bet between Love and Sonic Temple, then, based on that news. But we shall see when the scores come in. Right, let's have some highs and lows. Mark, what you got?
Well, I think Soldier Blue actually is my low. But, oh God, how to choose? Let's say Firewoman. I mean, there are two or three that have got the same score here. So, Firewoman. If I had to take one to a desert island.
Low, it'll be between Soldier Blue, Working in Time for Freedom. Yeah, it really does drop off at the end there. And the high, cigarette paper between Sun King and Firewoman. I think as a starter, it is an absolute corker. Crumbs. Today, Sun King. Right.
Okay. I was going to say it'd be interesting to see the difference between side one and side two, but my favourite is first track of side two, Solar Silence. That kind of knackers that possible source of conversation. But my weak link, Soldier Blue, I think, for me. So there you go. Album 2 of 3 sent to us from Down Under by Tony. Hope, I'd be interested to know your thoughts on I'm presuming that Tony loves the bollocks off all three of these things. So
he loves his 80s music. Yeah,
he loves his 80s
metal.
Yeah. Even hair metal like the Cult. How about that?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So one more, and this is the interesting one. A really, really interesting one. Only because it's a band I've not heard of, and I don't know about you two, but this was the wild card from our man in Queensland. The Angels. I mean, we've done we did an episode on Angels, but it wasn't this band. We had 3 others, I think. Yeah. So it's a well-worn noun in the world of metal. But this is the Angels from Australia, I'm guessing. But I know a man who knows more than I do, and that's Richard, because he's researched them. So what do we know?
Opening album sleeve notes.
Yeah, they've been going a while. We're talking here about an album they brought out in 1989. They were actually formed in the mid-70s, in 74, in Adelaide, by their frontman, Bernard Doc Neeson. They sort of were doing the circuits and everything else, but then they supported AC/DC during a South Australian tour. And with the recommendation of Bon Scott, Malcolm Young, they signed a recording deal with Albert Productions, AC/DC's label. They got a contract with CBS in 1980, and released a number of albums, various albums. But the one that Tony has chosen for us is their 9th studio album, Beyond Salvation. That was released in November 1989 in the US, followed by June 1990 in Australia, and then sometime in 1990 as well in the UK and Europe and elsewhere. It was recorded in 1989 in Memphis, Tennessee, at Ardent Studios and Alpha Sound Studios. It was produced by Terry Manning, who we featured many times before, and we connected with Memphis and also with the likes of ZZ Top, amongst others. The album runs to just over 48 minutes in length. The band at that time, so Doc Neeson still on lead vocals, Rick Brewster lead guitar, Bob Spencer on rhythm guitar, James Morley on bass, and Brent Eccles on drums. It didn't really do much in the rest of the world, but it got to number one in Australia. It went platinum in Australia, and was the 23rd top-selling album that year in '89 in Australia. So I mean, these guys were big news in Australia. Track-wise, it runs to 11, 6 on side 1 and 5 on side 2 that I'll talk about in a minute. But what was interesting was that the 11 tracks properly, recorded and released in Australia for this album, only 3 of them made it onto the international release. The rest of that album taken up by 6 tracks off of previous albums, which I'm presuming CBS and Epic decided that they would blend to see if they could actually get this Australian band to break it elsewhere in the world. One of those songs is a song called "Am I Ever Gonna See Your Face Again," which I think is their most famous song inside Australia. Plenty of YouTube videos about it because it has a crowd chant retort to the words of the title of the song, and that retort is in typical Australian style: "No way, get fucked, fuck off." So yeah, search out the YouTube clips. It's very funny, and it would. Tony has loved going to Angels gigs and shouting this back at the band. A little bit of other history. Unfortunately, Doc Neeson was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2013, and eventually he died the following year. But they're held in huge regard in Australia, and the likes of Midnight Oil, Rose Tattoo all came to the Doc Neeson benefit gig. But outside Australia, they've been cited by Guns N' Roses, Cheap Trick, Great White, and even Pearl Jam as having influenced their music. So, yeah, shame on us for not knowing about these guys. Thank you, Tony, for introducing us to them. It's been a really, really good listen. How have you gone with it?
Yeah, it's been it's easy to criticise bands for being a bit derivative, isn't it? Though you probably know where this is going, because to be honest, pretty much all bands are going to be derivative in some sense, aren't they? Because we're all singing from the same rock template, and this album's not massively original. Let's not pretend any otherwise. But it's good. It's really good. It does get a bit samey, and they are definitely a decent guitar solo or two short of being really excellent. But there are no duffers on here, no duffers at all. 1 or 2 very decent tracks, and a few more that are fine. And this has been a grower. It's a slow grower, admittedly, but a grower. There's going to be AC/DC references in our conversation. The idea of them supporting AC/DC, don't shut your eyes, because you're going to wonder who's on stage at any one time, aren't you? But we didn't hate on Crocus for the same thing particularly, did we? And they were more AC/DC than AC/DC at times. And you wouldn't say that about Angels. This is clearly an album which means the world to Tony. I don't quite get it to the same extent that Tony does, and doubtless millions of other Australians who have grown up on this sort of stuff, who would tell me over a beer or two why he thinks it's better than I think it is. But it's just missing some magical ingredient. I can't put my finger on it because I'm not creative enough to figure that out. But there's just something slightly missing about it. But I've scored it well because it's not a dull listen by any stretch. I've enjoyed it. I
broadly agree with all that. I think the thing it's missing is it isn't truly original. I think that's the issue with it. As somebody who is an unashamed and unapologetic AC/DC fan, I'm just sitting there going, well, you can hear the influence in this. And the fact that they supported, AC/DC, the fact that, clearly Bon and Angus and Mal gravitated towards them, and no surprise there. I think the only reason the Angels are Australia's biggest selling band is because probably somebody decided that AC/DC were 4/5 British and therefore didn't qualify. Because I can't believe the Angels outsold AC/DC in Australia. Even though AC/DC, I think, got a bit of shtick for not really coming home very much. But anyhow, that's by the by. Like you, it's grown on me a lot over the week. Some tracks that I kind of almost dismissed at the beginning of the week have become favourites as the week's gone on, and I think that really kind of demonstrates one of the challenges that we have on the show, which is if you spend long enough with something. I mean, I remember having this with Lucifer's Friend, back in whenever we did that a year or so back, or a bit more now, and sitting there thinking, I don't get it. This appears on every top 50 list, top 20 list of hard rock and heavy metal albums of the 1970s and beyond. What is the fuss about? And then suddenly, I don't know what it is, but something just happens and your ears click into place, and suddenly I got it. And the same thing happened with this band and this album this week. And yeah, I finished the week really enjoying the time that I spent with it. I think it. Yeah, I agree with you, Steve. I don't think it is, a wildly original or wildly creative piece of work, but it is an enjoyable piece of work. And ultimately, isn't that what counts in the end, anyway?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So 11 tracks, as I mentioned earlier. Side 1 is Let the Night Roll On, Backstreet Pickup, Dogs Are Talking, Rhythm Rude Girl, Jump Back Baby, and Love Waits. And on side 2, we've got Bleeding with the Times, Pushing and Shoving, Bitch, Beyond Salvation title track, and final is Take an X. Right, so let's kick off then. Let the Night Roll On. I mean, it's a good opener, isn't it? I mean, and I do like Doc Neeson's voice. I mean, it again, it's a bit sleazy in this opener. I mean, this I've got here sort of this is this comparison. It's as AC/DC meets a bit of Bryan Adams' Reckless in terms of the guitar. Really catchy chorus, and I can just imagine. I mean, this would be great live. I mean, it really drives you along. I think it's a good opener.
This is one of those that grew. I mean, because as soon as you hear the start, those first 10 seconds for you riffs, you're thinking, oh fucking hell, straight off Power Ridge. And you're thinking we're going to get some third division DC here, but it's not. It's more than that. It's bluesy. There's an okay solo. I've got a weakness with the solos on here, but it gets you in a happy enough place. It's not spectacular, but I think it's a really good start. It's a really, really decent start. And one of the tracks on here that's definitely grown on me as the fortnight or so's gone on.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think one thing that I would observe about this and other tracks on the album is it's almost like they've got one too many steps in the process sometimes. I can't remember which one it was. Backstreet Pickup, I think it is, where you just think, actually, if you'd taken out a couple of bars and got to the chorus quicker, it would have been a much better song. And I kind of feel like that about a lot of the songs on the album, that they've almost overcomplicated it, and in overcomplicating it, they take something away from it. They do that on this as well, I think, but it's not quite as much of an issue for me. I think it is. It's a great chorus. You know, in a live setting, you're just going to have the time of your life.
Yeah, and the energy carries on, doesn't it, into Backstreet Pickup track 2. Really nice, dirty guitar sound on it. I like these first couple of tracks.
Our simpleton riff friend will love this. I mean, that riff's great, isn't it? The way it picks up, a Backstreet Pickup, it does pick up. I think it's a great song.
Yeah, it is a great song, and it's almost like he's borrowed Billy Gibbons' guitar. It's tuned the same way, isn't it? I would have called it Nice to See You Again, because I don't think the Backstreet Pickup bit of the song is necessary. It just, this is another bit where you just go, no, just get to the chorus because it's really good. This has grown on me a lot, but I could do without that Backstreet Pickup bit. All right, so Doug's Talking are next. This is a bit more sort of stripped back, isn't it? A bit simpler, not as good as the first two for me. Charges along nicely. Reminded me a bit of Jackal. Remember we did Jackal back in episode 29?
Going back to their punk roots a little bit, aren't they, as well, with this?
Yeah.
It's a proper kind of, it's a big old new wave chug. You can see someone with a sort of nasty snarl having a spit, safety pin in his mouth. It's got that sort of sound to it, that sort of vibe to it. It's not as good as the first two, no, you're right.
No, it's not, and it wouldn't be out of place on their debut or their second album.
No.
And I wonder when it was written, actually. I wonder if this is something that maybe was left over from a previous session, because it is a very different listen to the rest of the album, isn't it? Yeah, that's followed by Rhythm Rude Girl, which, first time I heard it, I thought, has AC/DC suddenly got onto my playlist? That real stripped back, proper AC/DC start. Very Angusy guitar fills on it. Big, solid, proper Williams bass line. And a really catchy chorus. Yeah, I like this. But it's quite more. Well, so it's quite more. Well, that's not even English. It's a bit cleverer, I think, as a song. With the first three, you can almost sort of see a bit of a template. But this is a bit different. It's got a bit of sort of jazzy, funky stuff going on it as well, which I think is just quite a refreshing thing. 5.5 minutes, possibly a bit long, I would say, but I'm not going to give them hell for that. Yeah, it's good.
No, you just said two of the worst words in rock music: jazzy and funky. So. Yeah.
so you don't like this much then, Steve?
It's all right. It's a bit bluesy, bit groovy, which are probably better ways of saying jazzy and funky. It's not knocking me off. It's not knocking me off my feet, certainly.
All right, so what about Jump Back Baby? That's fairly straightforward for me. I mean, catchy choruses. They do catchy choruses. I like the bass line again, but the side's starting to tail off a little for me.
Again, this track lacks a guitar solo, a memorable guitar solo as well, and this whole album does, really. It's okay.
I think, I don't know, because obviously, we've become experts on this band in the week.
That's right.
What is the problem here, that they're trying to be a live band in the studio? Because I imagine that live, this band were quite impressive. Because this type of music isn't it? Live, you think about AC/DC and Full Flight. They're quite a sight and a sound to behold. And I wonder if this is the same, and maybe actually it's always going to sound a bit flat, because that probably when you put them on a stage, they're going to be 8-10 times better. I don't know. Because I don't.
Yeah, no, that's a valid. I mean, you're going to hate me for saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Kiss. I mean,
Yeah.
it's exactly, yeah.
All right. Well, let's finish off side one with Love Waits. Probably the weakest track for me on the side. I feel the chorus is a bit flat because the verses promise more. And the verses, well, that's unskinny bop. The verses are unskinny bop.
What can you say? I mean, I'm trying to find something constructive to say about it, but it side one goes out with a bit of a whimper, doesn't it? To be honest,
there's a decent element or two in there. I like. There's one or two tasty bridges, but there you go. That's the positive spin in it. But that finish, that half drag, which is a shame. But therefore, it demotes the track to little more than just okay, really.
I quite like the chorus. I do quite like the chorus. It's fine, but again, you look at it, you go, well, it's 11 tracks, lads.
Yeah.
You could have done 10, and I kind of feel a bit like that about the last track on the album as well, to be fair. But
Ooh.
Oh, we're going to have a bit of conflict, are we? Excellent.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, yeah. So, right. Yeah. So let's flip it over. And track one of side two is Bleeding with the Times, which I really like.
Yeah.
This has grown on me a lot.
No, I got this. I think I was on board with this the first time. It's a kind of good old fashioned storytelling.
It is, yeah. Springsteen could have done it. It's that sort of song. It's that sort of feel to it, and it makes it very engaging. I mean, again, not an unusual backbeat because that's been going on all the way through, and that's fine. But I really like this. I think this is very decent. One of the tracks of the album for me.
Yeah. The track of the album for me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too.
Yeah. All right, and that's covered. That's followed by Pushing and Shoving, another very AC/DC start, but the best description I could come up with for people listening. This song is Aerosmith's Ragdoll meets Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues.
Yeah, it's back to that sort of mid-pace boogie style, isn't it? It's a come down after Bleeding with the Times for me. It's okay. It's okay.
I quite like Pushing and Shoving. I think there's no great predictability about it. I think it's got a good little melody running through it.
Yeah, that's followed by Bitch, where again they get punky again, don't they, in the verses?
Yeah, don't they just?
And then a bit southern rock in the chorus.
Yeah, I don't mind that punkiness. Again, very new wave, isn't it? It's almost like from a decade earlier. All energy, like the chorus. Once they get going, it's a kind of slightly predictable direction they're going to go in. But I've got no problem with this. I've got no problem with Bitch.
Yeah, to be honest, I can take or leave Bitch. I don't feel the same way about it as you do, Steve. It's not a bad track. Doesn't knock me off my feet. I mean, mercifully, it's only 2.5 minutes anyway, so it's kind of over and done with quite quickly.
Which leaves room for the best two tracks.
Well, does
Go
it?
on then.
Let's talk about
on.
it then.
Take us through Beyond Salvation then.
Oh, I love who doesn't like a bit of super fast hand jiving? I love Beyond Salvation. I think it's brilliant. It's a really hooky riff, great chorus, and repeat. How simple is that? I've got no issues with that at all. Apart from the solo again, obviously that's almost a given. But the nuts and bolts of Beyond Salvation are just great. It's a proper dance metal song. It's got a whole lot of Rosie feel to it.
Yes, it has.
You want to
it
tap
really drives along. Oh, another foot tapper, Steve. Very good.
Yes, another foot tapper. Yeah, in a good way.
All right, and then and so we finished the album with Taken X, and this is a departure in style, isn't it? I don't know. I'm getting bits of Cars, bits of In Excess, almost more modern. Sounds like Steve, you really like it.
I do. I think it's. I love it. I think it's a bit thoughtful. It's a bit different. You're right. Cleverly written. Again, sounds like from a different. I was thinking when I first heard it, I was thinking of one of those kind of mournful new wave bands who used to appear on what was that fucking awful show on Channel 4, The Tube? Like a band like Swan's Way, who'd stand there all earnestly and having a dart at doing some nwobum. And I'd have liked more like this, Like there are points in this song. There's a really brilliant sort of whammy bar screech into a riff that's to absolutely die for. Little pickups and bridges, and that's the kind of subtlety that you kind of. God, how poncy does this sound? That you'd like to have heard in some of the other tracks. I just think it's brilliant. I think it's really, really clever.
Yeah. There's an real atmosphere about it, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
To be honest, Mr. Simple in the corner doesn't understand why it's on the album.
Yeah, I mean, it is a departure in style.
Yeah. Yes.
And quite bold to finish with it, as opposed to have it sort of somewhere as an interlude on the earlier sides. All right. Well, so there we go. That's Taken X, finishing Beyond Salvation by Angels, the third of Tony's choices for us. So we better do some highs and lows for this one. Mark, do you want to go first?
So my low is Love Waits. I think it's an unfortunate inside one, if I'm being completely honest. But is immediately followed by the track of the album. So Bleeding with the Times.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bleeding with the Times would be my track of the album, and Rhythm Rude Girl is my weak link.
So yeah, for me, it's a trio for Bleeding with the Times as the track of the album. So we're all agreed on that. And I'm with Mark on the low, which would be Love Waits. So, well, yeah, thank you, Tony. It's been really, really good discovering this band, and we'd recommend people give them a listen. They've got a good selection on Spotify of their albums, and we will be featuring them again at some point in the future. Right, well, that brings us to the end of this special. What we now have to do is find out where these end up in the Hall of Fame by scoring them, which we will do right now.
Reviews complete. Initializing rating process.
3 albums, starting off with Zodiac Mindwarp and The Love Reaction and their debut album Tattooed Beat Messiah. Well, it fared about as well as I thought it would, to be perfectly honest. I think kind of reflecting the fact that it's really kind of a fun novelty record and not a huge amount more than that. But, it's done all right. Steve, you gave it 6.4. If we're rounding up, I gave it 7.2. I liked it most of all. Richard, you gave it a 6.5. Again, if we're rounding up, to give it an overall album score of 6.68788. Steve, the fantastic Sonic Temple by The Cult.
Well, fantastic enough, in as much as it's the pick of the 3 albums scores-wise on this episode, certainly, and it scored very well. You salivated, and your salivation is evidenced in your score of 8.3. Richard and I were slightly more lukewarm, but still liked it. Richard gave it 7.35. I gave it 7.4. For an overall total score of 7.68333. Richard, Angels, Beyond Salvation.
Well, we were pretty consistent in our scoring of Beyond Salvation. Steve gave it a 6.91, Mark a 6.94, and I was the lowest of us with the 6.63, and that gave the Angels an overall of a 6.83. So they just beat Zodiac Mindwarp out of the 3 of these albums, but The Cult is top. Let's see where the 3 are in our Hall of Fame.
It's time to put the rock in a hard place. Opening the Hall of Fame.
Okay, let's be honest. 2 of them haven't done that well. Tattooed Beat Messiah by Zodiac Mindwarp and the Angels Beyond Salvation are in the lower regions of our league table of excellence. They've scored all right, high 6s, but there's some good stuff. As we know, between the years 1970 and 1995, and there's an awful lot of them, a lot of those albums weighing those 2 down. Better, by some distance, was The Cult's Sonic Temple. And I asked the question right at the start, because, of course, this is the second Cult album we've done, the first being Love. And I thought, well, I asked the question kind of rhetorically, thinking the answer would be not a fucking hope in hell. The question being, will it do better than Love? And I eat humble pie because it has, bizarrely. The Sonic Temple got the score of 7.68. Love got a total score of 7.64. And I'm racking my brains now trying to figure out what brought Love down. But anyway, because we all loved it. But there you go.
I can answer that question.
Go on.
Well, I gave I didn't check my scores. I didn't benchmark them against Love before we did the scores, but I gave Sonic Temple a full 1 mark more than Love.
Well,
which kind of reflects how I feel about it, if I'm being completely honest. So I'm sort of, yeah. Whereas you guys, you were much closer.
Yeah. Well, that is the idea, isn't it? I mean, we're all honesty and integrity, and that's fair enough. I mean, it doesn't stop you being a twat, but I mean that's fair enough.
Yeah, that's got nothing to do with my taste in music. That's just because I'm a twat.
Yeah, no, that's good. But I listen. There's nothing between the two of them. If let me go back to the league table. There's what is it? 7.68. Sonic Temple 7.64. Yeah, it's matched. It's cigarette papers, isn't it? In the grand scheme of things, 2 albums we loved anyway.
Yeah,
so
4/10 of a mark between it.
Yeah.
Personally, based on the very kind of basic listening that I've done over the week, just to get some context, I think, Tony, you gave us, with the Angels, you gave us probably an album that you love, which is great, but I actually think there are better albums for us to listen to from them to come as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they do, because we will be revisiting them. They're definitely worth that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tony, for your 3 suggestions. Please, if you're out there listening to us, we'd welcome another 3 of your choices to go in the Hall of Fame. Please do check out the Hall of Fame, of course, first to see what we've already covered. And we'd be delighted to run another one of these shows reviewing your albums in our own very, very special way. So thanks again for listening. We'll see you again very soon for another regular episode. And take care of yourselves. Bye.
All music clips featured in the Enter Sadmen podcast appear within the context of criticism and or commentary, and as such are used under the fair use provisions of the exceptions to copyright rules of UK and international copyright law. To make sure the rock rolls forever on, Mark, Steve, and Rich urge all their listeners to show their love and support for the artists and writers featured on the show by purchasing the original music or subscribing to a licensed and regulated streaming service.